Fidel Castro Ruz was born on August 13, 1926, in the town of Biran in the Oriente province of Cuba. His father, Ángel Castro, was a wealthy sugar cane farmer, and his mother, Lina Ruz González, was a farmer's daughter. Fidel was the oldest child in a family of 5. He grew up on a sugar cane farm inherited from his father in Biran. Fidel's childhood took place during a tumultuous economic and political period in Cuba. The country was under the dictatorship of Batista, and poverty was widespread. From a young age, Fidel was politically active. He advocated for the rights of the workers on his father's farm and criticized the political situation in Cuba. He attended Dolores College in Biran for high school. During this time, he started showing interest in Cuba's fight for independence, reading about Cuban heroes like José Martí and Antonio Maceo. He became involved in opposition movements against Fulgencio Batista, the dictator leading Cuba at the time. In 1945, he entered the law faculty at the University of Havana and became actively involved in student movements. While at university, he delved deeper into Cuba's economic and political issues. He delivered speeches criticizing the Batista regime, wrote articles, and established connections with student groups fighting for Cuba's independence. Castro's experiences in his childhood and youth significantly influenced his political views. The poverty and oppression he witnessed strengthened his belief in social justice. Attack on the Moncada Barracks. On July 26, 1953, Fidel and 162 armed revolutionaries attacked the Moncada Barracks in Santiago de Cuba, located in the east of Cuba. The Moncada Barracks was an important base for Batista's army. The attack was suppressed by Batista's army, and Fidel and his comrades failed to seize the barracks. Over 60 revolutionaries were killed in the attack, and more than 150, including Fidel, were arrested. This attack is considered the beginning of the Cuban Revolution. It strengthened opposition to the Batista regime in Cuba and propelled Fidel Castro to become the future leader of Cuba. Due to the attack on the Moncada Barracks, Fidel was imprisoned from 1953 to 1955. During this time, he wrote a book called History Will Absolve Me, which laid the ideological foundation for the Cuban Revolution. While in prison, he advocated for the need to fight for social justice in Cuba and overthrow the Batista regime. Fidel's writings and speeches strengthened opposition to the Batista regime in Cuba and played a significant role in shaping him as the leader of the Cuban Revolution. During this period, he gained a deeper understanding of Cuba's problems and developed the determination and leadership skills necessary to achieve the revolution's success. Exile and return to Cuba. Fidel was released in 1955 and was expelled from Cuba. He went into exile in Mexico, where he planned to return to Cuba alongside Che Guevara and other revolutionaries. In 1956, Fidel and his comrades returned to Cuba with a group of 82 people and initiated a guerrilla movement in the Sierra Maestra Mountains in eastern Cuba. Utilizing the mountainous terrain and local support, they engaged in a successful struggle against the Batista army. By 1958, the guerrillas defeated the Batista army, gaining control over a significant portion of Cuba. On January 1, 1959, under the leadership of Fidel Castro, the guerrillas entered Havana and overthrew the Batista regime. After Revelation. After the triumph of the Cuban Revolution in 1959, Fidel Castro began the challenging task of consolidating his power and implementing his vision for Cuba. As the new leader, he swiftly moved to enact socialist policies and land reforms, which aimed to redistribute wealth and power within the country. One of Castro's first actions was the nationalization of industries and enterprises owned by foreign companies. This included American-owned businesses, which caused considerable tension between Cuba and the United States. As a result, the U.S. government placed an embargo on Cuba, exacerbating economic difficulties for the island nation. Fidel fostered close ties with the Soviet Union, which soon became Cuba's main supporter and economic partner. This friendship led to the signing of an economic agreement in 1960, where the Soviet Union agreed to purchase Cuban sugar at high prices, providing much-needed revenue for the struggling economy. The close relationship with the Soviet Union worried the United States, especially during the height of the Cold War. The U.S. perceived Cuba under Castro's leadership as aligning itself with the Communist bloc and as a potential threat to its interests in the Caribbean. Fidel's consolidation of power also saw the establishment of a one-party political system, with his own Communist Party as the ruling and only recognized political organization in Cuba. This system allowed Fidel to tightly control the political landscape, with dissenting voices and opposition parties becoming marginalized or suppressed. Furthermore, Fidel implemented various social programs aimed at improving the lives of the Cuban people. Accessible healthcare and education became key priorities, resulting in the creation of a comprehensive public healthcare system and the establishment of a robust education system with high literacy rates. While Fidel's focus on social welfare and Cuba's commitment to international solidarity in supporting revolutionary movements in other countries garnered support from many, critics argued that these policies came at the expense of individual freedoms and human rights. Political dissidents, journalists, and opposition figures often faced imprisonment or exile. The economic policies pursued by Fidel, including the nationalization of industries, state-controlled agriculture, and central planning, led to challenges and prolonged economic difficulties. Cuba experienced shortages of essential goods, low wages, and a stagnant economy throughout Fidel's reign. The reliance on the Soviet Union for economic support also made Cuba vulnerable to changes in the global political climate. The Bay of Pigs and Cuban Missile Crisis. Bay of Pigs invasion, April 1961. Supported by the United States, Cuban exiles launched an invasion at the Bay of Pigs aiming to overthrow Fidel Castro's government. The operation intended to incite the Cuban populace to rise against Castro and initiate a rebellion. However, the invasion faced unexpected local resistance and counterattacks from the Cuban military. As a result, the invasion failed, and the Cuban revolutionaries repelled the invaders. This outcome significantly bolstered Fidel Castro's leadership and enhanced his popularity among the Cuban people. Moreover, the operation became an international embarrassment for the United States, drawing criticism on the global stage. Cuban Missile Crisis, October 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis marked one of the tensest moments of the Cold War. In response to the U.S.'s missiles stationed in Turkey, the Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles in Cuba. Revealed by reconnaissance photos from a U-2 spy plane, the U.S. openly addressed the presence of missiles in Cuba, escalating tensions globally. The U.S. initiated a naval blockade of Cuba and pressured the Soviet Union for the removal of missiles. The situation escalated, placing the world on the brink of nuclear conflict. However, through negotiations between Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev and U.S. President John F. Kennedy, a crisis resolution was achieved. The Soviets agreed to withdraw the missiles from Cuba, and the U.S. reciprocally removed some missiles from Turkey. This crisis significantly reduced the risk of global nuclear war, culminating in a peaceful resolution. Both events profoundly impacted Cuba under Fidel Castro's leadership during the Cold War era. The Bay of Pigs invasion enhanced Castro's leadership skills and local popularity, while the Cuban Missile Crisis highlighted Castro's significant role in the Cold War and caused widespread international tension. Transition of power and continued influence. Fidel Castro stepping down as Cuba's leader in 2006 due to health issues marked a significant turning point. His brother, Raúl Castro, assumed leadership, maintaining the socialist regime's continuity. Despite relinquishing the formal title, Fidel retained a significant influence in Cuban politics and continued to shape policies until his passing in 2016. He remained a prominent figure in the Cuban political landscape, advising and contributing to decision-making processes. Complex legacy and global impact. Fidel Castro's legacy is intricate and polarizing. Globally, he was seen as a symbol of resistance against imperialism and an inspiration for anti-colonial movements. His socialist ideals resonated with many seeking social justice and equality. However, his rule faced harsh criticism for alleged human rights abuses, political repression, and the stifling of dissent. The controversial expropriation of private property, censorship, and limitations on civil liberties drew condemnation from various quarters. Social reforms and achievements. During his leadership, Fidel implemented various social reforms. Cuba achieved notable successes in healthcare and education, boasting high literacy rates and a robust healthcare system despite economic limitations. He promoted land reforms and aimed to reduce social inequalities, emphasizing social welfare and egalitarian principles. Economic challenges and controversial policies. However, his economic policies, notably the centrally planned economy, faced challenges. Cuba's economy struggled, leading to hardships, shortages, and reliance on external support, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The state-controlled economy limited innovation and development, contributing to economic stagnation. Ongoing debate and evaluation. Fidel Castro's legacy remains.